I can. Ah, there it is.
Okay. So I, Amy McMullen, am calling the Windsor Southeast Supervisory Union special meeting Monday, August 3rd to order. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? Hearing none. Our discussion item is the plan for reopening school.
Yeah, so why don't we kick that off? We met, I think it was last Monday, right? Was it last Monday? Yeah, it was last Monday. And one of the agenda items was reopening of school. And we got into some fairly lengthy conversations about a couple of things, including the plan for parents who, for whatever reason, and there's a variety of reasons, did not feel comfortable sending their children back to school. And so that led to some other discussions. And then, to be timely, because quite frankly, especially with a decision like that, who's actually going to send their child and who is not, we need to know sooner than later, because a lot of our planning, our future planning, will be based around how many kids we have in the building and how many kids we have trying to access their learning remotely. So we scheduled tonight's meeting. It's pretty rare that we have a supervisory union meeting back to back like this, but I think this is critical. And a matter of fact, we may want to try to stay to a schedule that has us meeting at least a couple of times a month during this reopening situation. But anyhow, the administrative team left because many of the administrators were on that call last week, and the administrative team left with what they felt was the charge to try to present some options for remote learning for those parents who chose it, because the board was pretty clear and has been pretty clear over the last month or so that they want that option for families. They want families to be able to choose a completely remote option. So we're prepared to talk about that tonight and a couple of other things, and Angie's going to actually give a little presentation about that, about the remote option, but maybe we can answer questions first. Can you see everybody, Amy?
No, I can only see 9.
Okay, Bill.
It's whoever is speaking is going to show up. Bill has a question or a comment. Yeah,
Bill has his hand up.
Yes, my first question is what board are you referring to, David? And I have not missed a meeting with the Ascutney board, and we have not discussed this. I have not missed a meeting with the SU board, and last meeting was the first time I heard that all boards were pushing for
a remote option.
And I have never been on a board that has pushed for a remote option. Amy, do you have an answer to that?
I'm talking about the SU board, but Amy, maybe you have more insight.
So part of the discussion last week was the fact that we do have families who might not be eager to send their children back, and so are looking for a remote option. And we also have to have a plan in place on the, hopefully not going to happen, knock on every kind of wood, that we have to take a step backward and close our schools and be ready with a plan for remote learning.
Right.
Something that is more user-friendly and family-connected than what the emergency was put in place last March.
Right. I understand that. I was at the last meeting, but David made a statement last meeting, and he just made it again, in which he stated that the boards have been on board to have a remote option. I have never been in a board meeting and when the board was on board to have a remote only option for parents.
Beth, yes.
I just want to echo Bill's sentiments there because I think I've said this probably 10 times. This will be my 11th of the high school needs, right. You can have a remote option, but in my mind, they should be in school. And that's why I've asked for the high school data to be subset out to see what the parents really want in high school. So again, my input is there needs to be a separate option, and it's not a remote only option ever has been what I was agreeing to or suggested ever.
Right.
Was it remote only? I just want to make that fine with Bill on it.
Okay, so
this conversation.
just a sec, David. Part of the reason that we're having this meeting tonight is because I think every person on this board was all over the place in terms of what was understood, expected, desired. So there wasn't any consensus whatsoever on what this plan was going to be. Thus, we're having this meeting now, and Angie is going to be providing the options because there are parents, they might not be the parents who are on this board, but there are parents who are saying, I don't want my child to go back to school. I want something remote.
And by the way, there are high school parents who are asking for that too.
Exactly.
And I think it would be inequitable to offer it just to K-8 and not offer it to the high school. If we offer a remote option, it has to be open to all parents who request it. Beth's trying to say something, I think. Beth?
Yeah, I said I agree. I understand the intent, but I'd like to see the data broken out by the high school. Thank you.
So Angie, are you ready to present? Is that where we are now?
By the way, just one last comment. If this board wants to vote that we will not offer a remote option for parents, that's going to save the administrative team a lot of time because we just spent a whole week working on this. So, I mean, if that's the consensus of this board, we don't need to go any further. I don't want Angie to even present if this board does not want a remote option for parents. If you do not want a remote option, and maybe we need to take a vote on that because, you know, I just don't, we just spent a week working on this. And if that's the case, then, you know, then I don't want Angie to even present.
And David, I think people understand that there needs to be a remote option, particularly if we have to shut down again. So I agree, the time is not lost because we know. Right?
No,
So
that's not what we're talking about.
No,
we are not talking about if we shut down. If we shut down, we'll work that out. Yeah. This is for parents who choose not to send their children back to school. If we don't want that option, I can send that letter out tomorrow. I thought I had consensus last week because I sent a letter out last week telling parents there would be a remote option. So I am thoroughly confused tonight, quite frankly.
Colleen.
Hi. Yeah, I realize the high school may not have talked about it. I know in our Heartland School Board, it's something that we do want because we're going to lose our parents to homeschooling programs.
Yeah.
So that would be my question to this group is, you know, would you prefer to lose enrollment because there are parents that are not sending their kids to school? Do you want them to go to homeschooling, or can we provide them an at-home option and an at-home option?
Yeah, and I think the at-home option is a solution, but again, I just want to, Ray, maybe it was the terminology. It's not the only solution.
No, this meeting was to talk about what was possible to do.
No, it is about what is possible. We're not going to offer only one or the other, at least to begin with. But we have, unless we want the families who do not want their child entering the building this fall, we have to offer some sort of remote option. Otherwise, they are going to be homeschooling or going to another source for education. And that, I understand, Beth, that you want to see the data for high school, et cetera, but that does not negate any of this conversation. We still have to have that.
And by the way, it's not definite yet, but there's been some serious talk that there will be a bill presented when the House and Senate reconvene to hold ADM harmless. So even if everybody goes to a homeschool option, your ADM is not going to change. I thought what I was hearing from board members was that you wanted to keep these families a part of your district and your community, and to be able to have some sort of, contact with them. And that's why the administrative team has been looking at the different options to do that. So, and I thought that was matter of fact, I sent an email out last week because I felt there was consensus.
David, last
Go ahead, Bill. I can't hear you, Bill. Are you?
I hear you, Bill.
Okay, how about now?
Yes.
I got it.
Okay, so last week was the first time it was brought up
Right.
in a board meeting for me. So this is all new to me. I personally feel that a remote option is not something that would be a good idea because, it's an option in which if it's good for some kids, then it should be good for all kids. And if we will probably have to go that anyway, if there is an actual data-driven or in some sort of outbreak, we will have to go to remote. But to offer a remote option is just double duty. I mean, you're teaching two separate options for parents, and
So let's hear what Nancy has to say, because the options, the remote options, were a little bit different than a classroom teacher doing doing double duty.
I see Nancy's hand up too. I don't know if Nancy wants clarification.
Beth, you go after Roy. But I mean, Beth, Roy, we go after Nancy.
Nancy, you want to put your volume on?
You're muted, Nancy.
She's trying to get her sound on. She's still trying to get her sound on.
I'll just go while we wait and figure out what's Nancy. This is Beth Roy. This is not something we are arguing about because this is an equity issue. Every family is in a different situation. We can't say there's no remote option. If you are a family that physically cannot go into school because of your family situation, you have somebody in your family going through chemo, you cannot have that exposure. You just can't. You have an elderly, parent that you're taking care of. You can't have that exposure. So there are families that are just in that situation, and we need to service them. We are not losing families because we refuse to service them. That is not an equitable place, and that is not our community. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you, Beth. Nancy.
Okay, I absolutely second that because one of the girls in Lexi's class is she can't go to school because of her immune system, and there's no way her parents would send her because she can't. And so it's not only the adults in their life; it's also some children that just can't be in a compromised situation, and we have to take care of them.
Yeah, and we had a lot of undecideds, but we had about 15 or so percent, and health and safety was probably the biggest reason that they weren't comfortable sending their child back yet. But again, you know, I will tell you, Bill, yes, last week was the first time the SU board discussed it as an SU board. But again, I feel the other boards had certainly spent time with some, you know, with some intent of offering something to those parents who didn't feel comfortable sending their child back. But I guess we can, as long as nobody else has questions, I'm okay as long.
All but the Ascutney board. The Ascutney board hasn't discussed this yet. I mean, that's the issue I have.
Yeah.
Is that when you make the statement that you have heard from all boards, the Ascutney board hasn't discussed it yet, and so
Okay, but Bill, and I agree, we're not going to argue. We're not going to argue about this. I get it, but that's why I brought it to the SU board, because I don't think we can offer a remote option in Wethersfield and not offer a remote option. Talk about disequity. That would just be awful. So
Yeah.
when we talked about it as an SU board, that's why we spent almost 2.5, 3 hours talking about the reopening at the SU level so that we could all get on the same page. We weren't going to take that issue, you know, to every single board and one would vote it down and the other would vote it up. That would not, I don't think that would be a good system at all. So that's why we said, let's come back next week and look at the options for remote instruction. That's what I thought.
Right, but David, I'm not arguing that. I'm just arguing the fact that you made the statement that all boards have discussed.
I meant this board. Sorry about that.
And because we are, the supervisory union is developing and coordinating the curriculum for all of our schools, this decision has to be made at the SU level. Just like David said, Mount Ascutney School District would not approve or disapprove something that was happening somewhere else. So
that's the impression I left with last week. So maybe we can let Angie go ahead and just present what the administrative team has been working on.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Sorry.
You're getting there.
I am.
I could tell.
Put this in present mode. So I do want to say that we, in terms of remote learning, the parents that see, and I'm not saying that middle school and high school children didn't struggle, because a certain number of them did for sure, struggled with remote learning and engaging. But we were very concerned about what remote learning would look like for our elementary students, particularly those families with the youngest of our children. So it occurred to me, as you all were talking at the beginning of this meeting, that we've got a better fleshed out plan for elementary than we do for middle and high school. But I think that's just another step that we have to take in order to find some solutions for our middle school and high school students. For them, it might be more courseware with their courses included in it, and frankly, there are a lot of options in those for middle and high school. A lot more options for middle and high school than there are for elementary school students. So I'm just going to start with a little bit of background based on our data. So 63% of the families that responded, and we have over 600 responses to our survey. That means over 600 families. Now, some of them might be, two adults in the household responded, but I think that's a fairly good representation of our entire supervisory union. So as more data comes in, these numbers don't seem to be changing. We have 63% of our families preferring to have an in-person or a hybrid model. We have 11% of our families saying that they want a remote learning only option for them, that they want to keep their children home. And then 25% of our families are are really struggling with what to do. They're not sure what to do. And Dr. Baker was right. For most of them, it's about the health and safety of their children and their family members. For some of them, it's about what they're waiting to see what the school's going to do. So they still feel like they don't have enough information to make that decision. And others are saying the logistics, I don't know how I can deliver my children to school and pick them up and in that shortened day. So these are some of the concerns. So I just added these slides. This was taken as a Friday afternoon. The yes, no's, and undecideds. And so you can see that 10 families responded from Albert Bridge, 8 yes, 2 no. And I'm just speaking these out loud for the folks that are on the phone and can't see the screen. Heartland, 116 yeses, 15 no's, and 55 undecideds. Weathersfield, 98 yeses, 25 no's, and 42 undecideds. And this is Windsor K-12, 168 yeses, 31 no's, and 69 undecideds. I went further and broke down the Windsor data. Unfortunately, the way we asked the question, it asked people to list all their children in one question. So breaking that out would have taken more hours than I had. So what I did in this slide is if they had a child that was, the oldest child was 6th grade or younger, then I looked at their results. So 51 of those families said yes to returning to in-person, 10 said no, 30 were undecided. The next set of parents had the oldest child was at least an 8th grader or a 7th or 8th grader was in the middle school. 14 yeses, 6 no's, and 6 undecideds. And of the remaining families, they had at least one high school age child. 103 said yes, 15 said no, and 33 were undecided. Do you have any questions? I hope that helps you, Beth. That was particularly for Beth Carter.
Sort of. Yes, sort of.
Good. Okay. So when we asked them what the folks that said, no, we are going to do a homeschooling plan, we asked them what their plan was. This slide shows you that 14 said that they have filed or they will file an AOE home study plan, and the AOE calls it home study. 51 said that they were hoping for a school remote option, and 8 said they had filed a plan and they were also hoping for a school remote option.
So what I'm seeing, Angie, this is Beth, so less than 10%, right? So you said 600-ish people in total, right? Mm-hmm. So less than 10% wanted some sort of a remote option, and 10%, I don't know, 0.1%, 1%, whatever that number is.
Of the people, this is of the people who said no. This slide.
Exactly. Got it. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have time to do the percentages. So our plan is we have 3 options. We have an in-person hybrid model. We have a school approved remote learning option. And then there's the Vermont AOE home study plan. So I want to talk a little bit about in-person and hybrid and what we're planning to do. We don't have a solid remote option available. I mean, part of our hybrid model is a remote portion of that, and we're working on that. And the reason that we're working on that is because we got a lot of feedback at the end of last school year. So there were, first thing I want to make clear is that there's a big difference between emergency remote learning, continuity of learning, and then a planned remote learning. And so what we're doing right now is planned remote learning. What we did in March and April was emergency remote learning, and then at the latter part of April into the end of the year, we had a continuity of learning plan. We have lots of anecdotal stories about people that are saying that they noticed that the quality of the instruction improved as time went on in the spring. So the feedback that we got on the survey that was conducted in the middle of May, this from our partners at Battelle for Kids through our Portrait of a Graduate process, we sent a survey to parents, staff, and students. We had 180 parents respond. And if we continue distance learning in the fall, which of the following items would make the experience better for your child? And the highest pieces were that: more teacher interaction, more engagement, more ready reference resources, and better communication with parents, with teachers. They responded in this slide, parents are responding to the statement, the learning experiences for my child during the shutdown were engaging and motivating. For K-5, we had approximately 43% agree or strongly agree. For 6A, we had approximately 29% agree and strongly agree. And for 9-12, we had less than 20% agree or strongly agree. To me, that tells me we have some room for improvement. This question is specific to grade K-5 students, their parents. And what was interesting to note here is that most of the responses for how well these things were provided are in the adequate, well, and exceptional range. But we still have about 40% or more in the minimal range. So that's progress reporting, feedback to improve learning, practice work, like homework, communicating, presentation of learning material, and engaging motivated students. 6A, the responses were, again, adequate. Most of the responses were in adequate and well and exceptional. Progress reporting, communicating, feedback, engaging, and practice work and presentation of learning. But still, what's concerning is that minimal column, showing that communication, feedback, motivating our students, 40% on average, if you look at those results, are concerned about that for their middle school child. And then at the high school level, the responses are a little more favorable, that progress reporting, communicating, feedback, engaging. But a lot of them, you'll see, were in the adequate column.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking there's also room for improvement there. Are there any questions on the parent feedback before I continue?
So Angie, this is Beth. Will you,
Yep.
so that's the parent, this is the
Yep.
students, and I'm curious, right? And maybe it's in teacher feedback, because I'm curious to know what the teachers think about that data that's minimal. Like, did we get insights from the teachers too on that fact that it's minimal?
We did not have a chance to respond to that data. The teachers did not have a chance to respond to that data yet.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to say because
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
if we're coming up with an option, right, they need to
Yes.
be part of the solution, right?
Right. Absolutely. And I did not include the teacher feedback here either, because I was more interested in how we create what the students and parents are asking for. And maybe and sorry, I haven't looked at the teacher data for a couple months. The teacher data may support this as well. So interesting to note, this slide is from students, their perspective. The learning experience, we had about 136 students responded. This was in grades 6 through 12. The learning experiences provided during the shutdown were effective for keeping my learning on track. So we have about 40% agree or strongly agree. And 34% were non-committal. In the next statement, the learning experiences provided during the shutdown were engaging. We had 23% strongly agree, 37% were non-committal, neither, and 30% disagreed. So that was just of interest, that I thought that we should pay attention to that in particular. The next slide, this slide 8, question 18 came after question 17, which asked students, well, of their courses, which course did they find they had the best experience in? And what I've done here is and then this question says, well, why? Why was that class the best experience? And the things students noted was that when it was well organized and structured, when they felt that they had teacher support, when the learning was interesting and engaging. Of course, they had some other things too, like providing me adequate time to do my work. And in this slide, this is the students, from the students' perspective, what things could make it better, and less volume of homework, more motivating activities, more chances to learn with friends. They really missed their friends. That was the number one thing that they noted in terms of what was hard about remote learning. They want to work with their friends. They want to have more choice and more flexibility in how they spend their time in their learning activities. So does anybody have any responses, questions, thoughts about this data? Okay, so as you think about that data, when we thought about, well, why would we return to in-person instruction? We had several things that we wanted to make sure that we were providing, and that's that the biggest thing is that learning is a social process. We firmly believe that. We think our students learn better when they can socially interact with their teachers and their peers. Our students need support. No matter what age they are, they need support to be their best selves from the adults, all the adults in their lives. We want to provide essential learning experiences that may be missing in a remote environment. We want students to be engaged in their learning so that they by being connected to their teachers, sorry, I'm stumbling. We want those connections, those strong relationships to develop. I'm very concerned about a remote start, because I'm not sure how kindergarteners and first graders and second graders learn who their teachers are in that environment if they're not able to interact with them in person. And then the Vermont chapter of the Academy of Pediatrics supports in-person learning, especially for our youngest children. And that was based on a conversation that we had with 2 doctors, that the VPA, if you want to go to the website, the Vermont Principals Association has included the recording on their websites, right on the top page, of 2 pediatricians that have been working with the Vermont Department of Health and talking to us about how to best and safely open school. So students are, part of the equation. The other part of the equation is commitment to our teachers, and we know what we're asking them to do when we're thinking about remote learning. And the reason I'm sharing this observation with you is because when we think about a remote-only option, we need to think about the mental well-being of our teachers and how we support them to be the best in-person instructor that they can be. So we have made the commitment, we, the administrative team, has made the commitment that our classroom teachers will be conducting in-person instruction, and they will be supplementing those lessons with remote instruction. We've developed a schedule that includes and supports the mental health of both our students and our staff, keeping students in Dr. Baker has said this, but what in the level of care and attention that is going into teaching our students and having them in the building for 4 hours a day is probably the amount of energy that would take to do that 3 times, a whole 3 days of schooling. Remote learning for students who are entirely at home will be conducted through an alternative means. And what that means is part of our plan is to see if we can do that with some of our teachers who are not in charge of classroom instruction, or we may have to purchase that teaching support through other means, and I'll describe that later. So how are we going to support in-person instruction with that remote piece? Well, so that's what makes planned remote learning. What's going to make planned remote learning different than how it was in May, for example? And having clear expectations for quality remote learning for our teachers and our students. We want to have curriculum materials that support in-person and remote learning. In-service schedules, one of the big things for our teachers is they said that once they had their schedules, wrong slide. In-service schedules that allow for teachers to continue to collaborate on their interdisciplinary curriculum. Teachers were meeting in teams in June during our in-service and developing interdisciplinary units that included all the teachers in their design. Some of them only have a few teachers, but that's just because that was our first attempt. And as we move through the year and get better at doing that, we would be developing better and better interdisciplinary units. And we also found that a consistent schedule for staff and students was very supportive. And once those schedules were in place, in the last spring, people did comment that it was a much better experience. So when you're in the in-person instruction, you're going to have your essential instruction, and this is mostly for the essential instruction, math, language arts, and interdisciplinary is the elementary side of things. Math, language arts, social studies, science, and how that supports interdisciplinary is what we're looking at for our more content-focused, like middle and high school. We will provide opportunities for socialization and play, and there we also will provide lunch and breakfast. And we know that our food is the best in the state of Vermont, right? Of course. So option 3, that was all about in-person. Does anybody have any questions about in-person and how we're going to support in-person learning? Okay. So
I have lots of questions about it, but I'm waiting to hear the rest, I guess, before the floor opens up.
Right. I mean, and we do have a lot to still figure out for in-person, and we just want to say that. Option 3 is the Vermont AOE approved home study. And one of our biggest concerns with this is we've always had families that have home studied their that have done home study for their children for various reasons. And we want to make sure that the ones that would typically be in school, that we are keeping in touch with them and that we are providing the supports that we have the capacity to support, to do that, to keep those communication channels open. I don't know what that looks like, but we want to make sure we figure that out. So that gets me to the school approved remote learning and how we could make this work. So last Monday at the SU board meeting, we were talking about an option through a program called Vermont Virtual Learning Cooperative. And I have outlined here what that program entailed. And it was a give to get. So what the program was designed by Vermont Virtual Learning Cooperative, which has been around for a number of years, and high school students have taken courses through them. It's a remote learning. And the program works, the option for us was an answer to staff who may not be able to do in-person learning because we could not accommodate them through the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. So if we had staff that met that criteria, our accommodation for them could be a remote learning option where they would teach remote learning. The Vermont VLC option is called Collaborative Schools. It would require that we loan a teacher for the school year to the program, and that teacher would teach full-time for Vermont Learning Cooperative. That teacher would agree to take the 9 graduate credit course in order to earn their online teaching endorsement, which we would pay for as part of our agreement with the program. That's $3,600. And the ratio, what we get in return for that is we would get 20 students that could enroll in that program. And that is a semester-long commitment for students. So they could stay in the whole year, but they'd have to agree to stay in at least the first semester. The design is really works best, well, if we had 20 elementary students, then we would need at least 1 elementary teacher, and same goes for middle and high school. So when we started looking at the numbers, we had a great concern about the capacity of our SU to give up teachers. And I'm going to use middle school as an example. In each of our middle schools, there is only 1 teacher per content area. So and our middle schools, 6th through 8th grade, have about 300 kids. And so if we think 10% said no thank you to in-person learning, and maybe of those undecided, maybe another 10% might decide to go to remote only. So we're playing with that number of about 20% we would be providing this remote service to. So 20% of 300 students is 60 kids, right? So that would mean that we'd have to send 3 middle school teachers to Vermont VLC in order to get those 60 seats. And because middle school teachers are content-based, we weren't quite sure how we could do that without creating a need in those buildings for more teachers in those content areas. So that would mean we'd have to hire 3 middle school teachers across this SU. And if those 3 teachers came from one school, that would be not very good. The second thing was that when we started digging into the curriculum, in particular, the curriculum for the elementary students, it seemed very traditional and very content focused, and we felt like it was contrary to the direction that we wanted to go with interdisciplinary. So we found another option, and I am by no means saying that this is a perfect option, but it is an option that checks a few boxes for us. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. Calvert Learning, you can go to calvertlearning.com and find out more about their curriculum. It's a project-based curriculum. They do say on the website for K-8, but they really think that the 6-8 is a little on the young side, and our middle schoolers are sophisticated. And so they probably would want a more course-based option that we will explore further this week. So one of the reasons that we think Calvert might work is it provides parents with the lesson plans. So the students see their lessons, they have their schedule worked out, and then the parents see the same thing the kiddos see, and they also have their teaching notes. So the example I am explaining is if the parent was in charge of the learning. And I will talk about that in a little I'll talk about an alternative to that in a little bit. But when the Calvert Learning Program was designed for homeschooling, and with that in mind, it was designed for homeschoolers who aren't necessarily licensed educators. So it really is designed so that as a parent, you can read through it and work together. There is a certain amount of online learning that they expect the children to engage in, but there is a big component of project-based learning that's built into each of the units. It also includes some interdisciplinary, and it is a complete curriculum. So when we start thinking about that, we started looking at the numbers. So for elementary, we have, if we say we had 100 elementary students that required a home schooling remote option. When we started looking at the numbers, 5 teachers, this is totally an average, at $60,000 a year for a teacher would be $300,000, and 5 teachers at $3,600 each. This is for the collaborative schools option, the one that I first described, would be $18,000. So to get 100 students into the Vermont Virtual Learning Cooperative Collaborative Schools option would cost our district $318,000. With Calvert Learning, 100 students, if we used our teachers, so we may be freeing up numbers, and we may have licensed teachers that would be available, for example, our interventionists. We may be able to offer this Calvert Learning with our teachers, which I think is probably a more desirable option. And the student to teacher ratio is 50 students for each teacher, which gives us more bang for our buck. So the digital curriculum is $450 per student for 100 kids. That's $45,000. And for 2 teachers, that would be another 120. So for a total of 165,000, we could provide this option for 100 elementary students. Now, the other option that we were interested in Calvert for was because they also have an option at $22,700 per student where you could actually purchase teaching support for them. So that means a teacher we heard a lot through the remote learning. Now, some of the teachers, perhaps some of them on the call tonight, have stories of parents calling in exasperation and crying and saying, I can't do this. My child will not respond to me. This is too hard. So this option with a full teacher option would allow us to provide this without taking our staff to do it. One of the concerns we have for staff is because we are trying to stay within the options, the spacing, the distancing rules that we've had to, in some buildings, we've had to pull teachers away from their regular assignments and put them in the classrooms because we don't have spaces that can accommodate the distancing with a teacher. So because that group of students is too big, and our principals are using their spaces very creatively, and they're still having trouble with that in some of our buildings. So of the Calvert learning option, these are the considerations. For families considering this school-approved remote option, we would have to have a family commitment. We would probably want to come up with some guideline for that. It may look different for middle and high school. We still need to figure that out. But again, we don't want a middle school student or a high school student, for that matter, to take a quarter of a course and not finish it. So that would be the same consideration for our elementary students as well. We want to keep these students connected to our school, and this option allows us to keep them on our rosters. It also require us to be in contact with them, and we can get the reporting, so we have evidence of their growth and learning. And we'd have to figure out a process for that. There's still some unknowns with this, and it may be possible that we can use our own teachers to facilitate this option. So what we still have to work on is a middle school and high school programming for school-approved remote learning. And then the rest of the slides are about questions. So before I go to those slides, does anybody want to say anything?
In the chat, Sean is asking why this particular, the Calvert hadn't been shared before. It's my sense that the planning team has been looking at all of the options, and that is why you provided information last week and we're talking about it this week. Am I correct on that, Angie?
Yes, you are correct on that. And I think we're doing the best we can, and we might just not be fast enough. I don't know how else we're working as hard as we can to get this information out and to meet the needs of our parents and their students. And it's the best we can do right now. So if it wasn't earlier, I apologize. It was in the time that we had. So the board directed us.
That is exactly it, Angie, that it didn't happen earlier. It's that it didn't happen earlier. And that's a big,
I'm not sure I don't.
problem.
Yes, and now we're trying to solve that problem, Sean, right? Any other thoughts? So the questions might be of interest to you as well.
I think Sarah had her hand up.
Sure. Sorry, I can't see everybody on my.
I've got the grid screen.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Just a quick question about the in-person plan. So we'll have these pods of kids with.
Hey, Sarah.
Yeah.
Can I go to the next slide because I answered that?
Yes. Okay. Great. You got me.
Yeah. So the in-person plan, there was some questions about logistics of that plan. So the pod size is not a set size. It's determined by the space and the number of students who can fit into that space safely. So there's no hard and fast rule for that. So if that's why outside we can fit everybody. Well, we're fortunate in our schools we have space to do that. Teachers can move amongst groups of students. We just want to minimize the movement that students are doing. So teachers will be having the proper equipment to do that. And interdisciplinary instruction also creates a need for less content-specific instruction that's taught in isolation. That doesn't mean that won't happen. There will be science lessons and social studies lessons and art lessons, etc. But the whole goal is to support that interdisciplinary instruction. Math and ELA have been prioritized, especially for our younger students, K4. And in 5-8, core content may get a slightly greater emphasis just because 5-8, I guess it would be 5-12. I should have said 5-12 in that. And 3 of those credits will be delivered in the afternoon for our high school. 3 high school course credits will be delivered in the afternoon. So does that answer your question, Sarah?
She's got it. She says yes.
Okay. So then I wanted to talk about the question about what the professional development plan is. Well, we're creating that this week. We have our ad team retreat on Wednesday through Friday, and we will be planning that that professional development. We also believe that in-person instruction is the best instruction that we can offer, and that's where we have put our energies. Equity is a concern for this whole thing, and I just want to say that equity is really hard to control when parents have the choice of sending their children to school or not. So what we believe is that for those families that can't or choose not to send their kids to school, they do deserve a viable digital curriculum that will support their needs. We want to provide that option for a school-approved remote learning option. We will accommodate any student who cannot access the in-person learning option to the best of our ability. And we also know that there will be inconsistencies, and when all of this pandemic is done and we come back together and then we know that our MTSS systems will have to be ready to accommodate the learning differences that are just going to be a natural outcome of children being in different learning environments. And it is an equity issue in that families who can will, but we also want to make that the best. Families who can remote teach will choose that option, but I'm choosing to believe that they don't choose that option lightly because it's a very big commitment. And they're our partners in learning, and we want to support that, just like we want to support what's happening in our buildings and if that instruction goes remote, so that we can continue to provide a quality education for our kids. But the equity question is a deep one that we're straddling, right? And this is how we can meet. One of the questions was, what is it, why can't we have this program where teachers are teaching kids in the classroom, and then there might be some kids who are remote and who are connected to the classroom in a with a camera or something, so they can see what's happening in the classroom. And then in the afternoon when we're remote learning, those teachers are meeting with all the students together. And it's it's a very good question. I really wish I had a better answer, but we are trying to accommodate our teacher schedules. We have prep time and duty-free lunches, and we want to provide time for our teachers. We promised them that we would provide them time to work on those interdisciplinary units, which takes, a lot of times when you're scheduling schools, like if the kids are off in PE, then the core team of teachers are meeting. And so what does the PE teacher do? They're off with the kids. So we have an awesome opportunity with this remote learning half days to provide our teachers with time to plan together. We also have the other meetings that are going to be happening that we normally always do, IEP meetings, 504, parent meetings. So this slide just gives you an idea of what the afternoon schedules will look like for our teachers. So knowing that our teachers want to do the absolute best for kids, but they need time to get that ready. So this is about supporting our teachers.
Angie, I'm not sure
all
you're
I
still
have.
sharing. I don't think you're sharing your screen
Oh,
right now.
shucks. I'm sorry.
I know you referred to that slide, but I did not see a slide.
I'm so sorry. I'm so
And
sorry.
while you're doing that,
I
Nancy
was
had a
excited
question.
about it, and here, let me
Nancy, did you
share
have a
that.
question?
Yes,
Here it is.
I still don't see your slide, but
Ah,
There
there
it
it is.
is. This one, Nancy.
I can see that. My question is, if the remote learning is being done by the Calvert system or some system,
If
Mhm.
we decide that, yep.
some reason the whole school, because of COVID, has to go to remote learning, what, do we just join that? Or there's money involved? What do the in-school students do if they have to revert to remote learning?
That's part of what our professional development time will be spent on, helping our teachers build their capacity to offer a robust remote learning option based on what they've done in person. So that
It'll be different from the remote learners then.
yes, one of the things we
Okay.
felt strongly was that we cannot ask teachers who are doing in-person learning also to do a remote learning option with different students. So it's different if it's their students in the classroom and then they're meeting and having a meeting maybe later in the afternoon with those students. Those are the students that they've developed relationships with. The school approved remote learning option has to be separate from that work so that our teachers can focus on that group of students. I hope that makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
Okay.
Just what I wanted to know.
Okay. Should I stop sharing now, Amy? Does it look like I can?
We saw your schedule. Was that pretty much the last slide?
Yeah, the rest of them were just answers to the questions that I summarized for you.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
will send a copy of the slideshow to the board members as well.
Okay.
That would be
Nikki Buck has her hand up. Can you see everybody, Amy?
No, I can only see 9 people at a time.
Okay. If somebody wants to speak up, and just to be safe, you might want to put your name in the chat box. But Nikki Buck has her hand up, and she also put her name in the chat box. So she did both.
And so did Colleen Spence.
Good. Colleen Spence did as well.
So I guess my question is to Angie. And I've said this before, my biggest concern is that we're putting all of this effort into in-person, which I think we need to do, and that's how we need to get the ball rolling. But the way I see this panning out, especially the way that Vermont's not going to be the island much longer nationally, I can't imagine a world where we get past October in the building. And so, I'm really concerned because if we only have 4 weeks of time in the building, that's not, and maybe a week of training, that's not enough time to create a remote curriculum. It's not enough time to have established capabilities of teaching remotely. And I'm really concerned that we're not going to have, some things improved in May, but other classes didn't. And so what's going to happen when we all go remote?
Okay. Yeah. So Nikki, I think that's a great question. And Angie, you can certainly chime in, but we, and again, you're asking a little different question than what happens to those students who are remote, sort of similar to what Nancy said, that you've got this sort of remote situation going on for those who parents do not feel like they want to send their children back to school. You're talking about improving, kind of the robust nature of that teaching and learning when everybody goes remote, if everybody goes remote, right? So what I can tell you is we've really been working on, and Angie, help me out here if you need to. We've really been looking at LMS systems, right? Part of the problem, and Larry, I think I saw Larry on the line too. Google Classroom and Seesaw, which were the two basic platforms that we used last year, especially Google Classroom, because that's the one that got used the most by the upper levels. I'd say from maybe grades 3 up. But what we realized was that, and I think teachers were doing incredible work trying to take what they were doing in person and then make that a completely 100% remote system through Google Classroom. But what we're learning is that's not really, a platform for home study. It's a platform for giving assignments, for following work, for maybe assessing work, for maybe uploading videos, for putting in links. But you're creating all of that and you're integrating that into that system. What we're finding is, whether it's Calvert, there are a couple of others, by the way, or VTVLC, with our teachers doing it, there are remote programs that are locked and loaded with all of what you need to perform a standards-based curriculum richly, that has some project-based work, that has some, exchange work back and forth, that allows parents to have more dialogue with the teachers on a regular basis, a whole lot of things. So the simple answer to your question is, while we're doing all of the other stuff that we're doing, getting ready for in-person, right, which is a challenge, we're also looking at these other models that will bring more integrity to the remote work when we go, when and if, and I tend to agree with you, it's when we go remote. And we're meeting now with teams to kind of look at these different models. We have a meeting tomorrow with a group of teachers and another vendor. So all that's happening simultaneously. The problem is, we're crunching into 10 weeks of this summer, this impossible task of, semi-impossible task of opening schools remotely with all these health guidance restrictions there. And at the end, trying to create something for a group of parents who may not want to bring their kids, may not want to send their kids to school, and trying to come up with a robust curriculum. So I know that's a roundabout answer to say we recognize that issue. The survey told us about that issue, back in May. We have worked on it, but we to be completely transparent, we have not decided on what that will look like. But it's got
to be vetted.
Can I add to that, David, that the extent that we can provide curriculum support, so resources, the LMS that helps teachers with that, it has content in it so that teachers aren't creating all their content. I had an email today from a teacher asking for a PDF generator that would create a worksheet. So if they uploaded a worksheet, they could then create a worksheet from it. And I'm like, this is something where if we had curriculum embedded into our LMS, they wouldn't have to be spending their time
trying to figure that out.
The resources and then creating rich, beautiful learning experiences with these resources. That being said, that's a commitment, and we need to make sure that we need to make sure that what we're looking at is not just fluff. So it has to be thoroughly vetted.
So I just want to say thank you guys, because that is the most reassuring answer I've heard so far on this question. And what my biggest concern was, and I hadn't heard what you just said so far, was that our teachers were going to be reinventing the wheel. And it really scared me in that there already are a gazillion homeschool and remote learning programs out there. And I don't want our teachers recreating the wheel. I'd love it if they could pick up something and run with it and add their own flair, but not have to be digging around and trying to figure out how to do this remote thing.
Yeah, how to create a PDF. No, I think that's a good point. And the teachers that are on the line, we thought that when we went to them with some other LMS options, so that that would have all of this stuff locked and loaded, that because of all the work they did last spring, that maybe some of them would be upset, because it's sort of like not honoring all that work. But with the experience so far with the teachers that we've been talking to, and that includes a group of teachers that are going to meet with, with somebody, with a vendor tomorrow night to look at and actually go through some of the modules. They were actually pretty encouraging. I mean, I think the teachers realized we were not trained to do this remote work. We were trained to do in-person instruction. And if you've got something that could help us, if you've got something that's locked and loaded with modules and videos and templates, and then we're not going to resist that at all. Some of them are on the line right here. Now, that doesn't mean that especially some of our primary teachers didn't really like Seesaw, because that pretty much is, that's one of these LMSs that has that opportunity. But anyhow, I think the simple answer to you, Nikki, is, we want to take, the remaining weeks here and get ready for that very strong reality that we are going to be remote. I happen to know that there are a couple of teachers on this call tonight, and they'll be glad to share that with you because they've shared it with us. They think we ought to start remote so that we could get good at an LMS, right? And then if we go back, right? But we're sort of practicing this reality that we're in, that I don't think is a 1 month reality or even a 6 month reality. I think this remote piece is going to be there for a while. So it's really a question of balancing the in-person, the remote, and then the totally remote. Did Colleen have a question?
Colleen has a question. Are you good, Larry?
Yeah. No, I would go ahead. Colleen can talk.
I think my question is for Larry, or a little bit. What is the LMS program versus the
Google Classroom?
Calvert, the homeschool programs?
Well, an LMS is a learning management system. So like Canvas is an LMS.
Okay.
And
PowerSchool?
PowerSchool, Unified Classroom part of PowerSchool is an LMS.
Unified Classroom.
PowerSchool part of PowerSchool is an SIS. So that student information system, which is where all the state reporting goes into.
Okay.
Just to piggyback on what Nikki was asking for, I think what the admin team has done is really looked at an option. Like, I don't want to give away the ghost, but David said, we're meeting with them tomorrow. And I think we just want to make sure it's good. We don't want to put it out there as an option until our curriculum director has vetted it, has gone through at least most of the modules, and her team has gone through. And we want to make sure if we put it out there as an option for teachers, that it's been blessed in a way. And we know that it's good. We don't want it, because there's a lot of products out there, so we just want to make sure that we can offer this as an option. I think if it's, I always find that the cream rises to the top, right? So if it is a good option and the curriculum piece and the instruction piece is good, then technology piece I'm not as worried about. If it's good content and a good delivery system, our teachers have gotten really adept at switching LMSs on the fly over the last 6 months.
Sadly.
So I'm not really worried about that piece. My only concern was that Angie signs off on it and her team, that the admin team signs off on it, that we can do it correctly, and then let 1,000 flowers bloom.
And then there is a part of it too, that, we'd like it to be affordable, right? I mean, I think part of it is, there are some great models out there, including Calvert. But if we did Calvert across the whole district, to the tune of 800 or 1,200, if we wanted to invest in their assessment system, it's that really, as you could see from Angie's slide, that really starts to add up. So we're trying to look at a couple of robust systems that will allow us to do the project-based interdisciplinary work, but at the same time, give our teachers a tool. So like you said, Nikki, they're not creating it on the fly. That's what they did last spring. It was great work, but it was work that was, it was 12 to 15 hour days. And in the end, it wasn't a system that was intended to be remote.
Laura Powers has asked to speak, and then Amanda French.
Laura's finding her volume.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Hey, Laura, we got you.
Okay, good. Just making sure. David had mentioned one point earlier about how teachers were feeling in terms of starting school. And I have written something that I would like to share with you all, if that's okay. I wrote it because it's easier for me to remember that way. But if you all don't mind, I'd like to read it to you. So it says, we as educators, oh, sorry, and just so you know, I'm speaking not for all educators in our SU, but for many, just so you know that. We as educators understand the importance of being with our students in person, face to face. Our goal, of course, is for that to happen. However, not like this. What is being asked of educators is crazy. We are being asked to jeopardize our safety, the safety of our families, the safety of our colleagues, the safety of our students, and the safety of their families. We are being asked to police students' behavior in a setting that is clearly taking us back to the 19th century, where they will be asked to sit or move only within their defined space. No singing, no sharing, no hugging, no relationship building, no cooperative play. Students and staff will be asked to be hypervigilant on hand washing, face covering, and social distancing, all the while trying to learn or teach in this environment where anxiety and uncertainty are running rampant. Families are being asked if they feel safe sending their children to school this fall, and a significant percent, as you saw, are choosing to keep their child home or are saying they are unsure of what to do. We will likely be giving them a choice to stay home and have their child educated remotely or send their child to school in person. Faculty and staff do not have this option. If they are uncomfortable or feel unsafe, they are being asked to take FMLA or write a request for an ADA accommodation with a doctor's note, as well as use up their accrued sick and personal time. Many have chosen to take early retirement, to find other work, or to just do it for the fear of losing their jobs. We have faculty choosing to come to school in person, even with their physician's recommendation that they do not. On a personal note, I understand the value of being able to work with my 5- and 6-year-old students face to face. I understand the value of building relationships and giving hugs. I understand the value of being able to collaborate with my colleagues on best practices for each of my students to learn at their own level. But I couldn't imagine the guilt or the sorrow I would feel if harm befell one of my students or colleagues or their families, because we made the decision to go back too soon and I couldn't keep them safe. Think about what that would do to our communities. We are not healthcare providers, we are educators, but we cannot teach if we're dead, and students cannot learn if they are. Are those harsh words to say and to hear? Yes, but it is the reality of where we are right now. It's been said, we will never know, if we do too much, but we will most certainly know if we didn't do enough. So I, as a teacher, as a colleague, as a parent, as a community member, am asking on behalf of the faculty and staff in our supervisory union that we give it more time. Let us continue our remote teaching journey until we can ensure the safety of our school family. We want nothing more than to go back and continue our jobs as educators, but we simply cannot do that without jeopardizing our safety. I will leave you with this one thought. If we are all here tonight via a Google Meet to discuss the safety of opening schools rather than meeting face to face, is that really the choice that we should be making? Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
Did Amanda French had a comment as well?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Laura, I second what you said. I think she spoke very eloquently about how many of the teachers feel, both gathering information from other teachers as union presidents, that both Laura and I are, but also from other staff members as well. There is some erroneous information out on the press that teachers are standing in the way of in-person learning, and that we don't want to do the work. And that's erroneous. That's misinformation. Teachers do want to work. Teachers work very hard. Teachers are very willing to work hard. And obviously in-person learning is the best. But we need to consider the risks involved. I'll read a little of some notes that I've prepared as well, if you guys can bear with me. And this is from an article that I had written after studying and looking at some information. And really what I want to say is, do we want to risk illness, death among children, staff, and families and communities? How many lives need to be lost before one loses sleep at night? Deep down, we all know what will happen. People will get sick. Vulnerable people will die. Even those who were otherwise healthy have succumbed to this insidious virus as it wreaks havoc on the human body, both short-term and who knows how long-term. There are no longitudinal studies on this new virus and what this virus will do to infected people in the future. There seems to be an attitude by the majority that will result in the loss of life if we continue to go open. I won't go into much more detail on this article that I've written, but it is seconding what Laura has said. The options that are out there are viable, they are workable, and they are doable. Online learning is not new. It's been around for 10 plus years at least. There have been really well-renowned platforms. I think Angie's dug into quite a few that might be viable for our SU. But safety is number one. Safety is number one. And when we're all safe and we've beaten this, I don't know how, we can all go back in person, God willing. But right now we can't. And I don't want blood on my hands. And I don't think it's right to put teachers in a position where they're hypervigilant about looking at every surface, every manipulative, every chair, everything a child does. And I have to teach, and I have to pretend everything is honky-dory behind a mask and 6 feet apart at all times. It seems militant and it seems unnatural for teachers and for students. And how well are students going to learn knowing they can't look? Well, they can look, that they can do, but they can't touch, they can't interact in a natural way. And their teacher is up there in an unnatural way trying to teach and feeling stressed and worried. Nobody wants to be at fault for an erroneous mistake made just because it was human error. And we don't want to lose kids, we don't want to lose staff, and we don't want it to affect our community members. So please hear us. Let us think about platforms that work, how we can make this doable, how we can incorporate families into the process. We can make this right. We can get this running. We need more time. And then, God willing, if Vermont is still the little island it is and we end up going in person, then so be it. But let's start remote. Let's start strong so that if things get worse, we are safe and we are up and running. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Amanda.
I saw Nancy's hand go up, Amy.
Thanks, Nancy.
I think I was talking to a grandchild, so no.
Okay. She was waving at her grandchild. Any other questions or comments? Can you see everybody, Amy?
I can only see 9 people.
Hi, Amy.
Yes, Sean.
I think this board was told that there was strong teacher representation on the reopening task force. And so I'm, if that's true, how could such an antithetical plan have emerged from the process? I guess that question is for David.
Yeah. I think what's happened, Sean, quite frankly, is as we get closer, anxieties rise. We've got a vibrant group of teachers on that reopening task force. I think they've been very open to the reopening plan. I think the statements from Laura and Amanda are not about the reopening plan. I think they're about when do we implement that plan? Do we implement that plan on September 8th? Or do we implement that plan on October 4th? Or do we implement that plan after Thanksgiving? I think that's what they're saying. And remember, we wouldn't even be having this discussion if the governor, we talked about this last week, if the governor hadn't authorized the school board to make the decision about how you want to open on September 8th. And you have the right as a board to open completely remotely. That doesn't make our plan, which teachers were invested in, a bad plan. It's just a matter of whether or not, as those anxieties rise, and everybody has their own level of anxiety about all of this, right? But the reason why I think you hear the voices of the teachers tonight, and I think they wanted to be here in person to say that, is because we will make these lofty plans in consultation with them, but they will be the ones that have to implement those plans and keep those kids in the straight rows and keep those kids with their masks on and keep those kids washing their hands and keep those kids from touching surfaces. These are the people in front of us now that have to do that. And I think as we get closer to September 8th, and by the way, I think you're going to see this across the state. It's not just going to be Windsor Southeast. There is going to be more and more anxiety that builds around opening that soon. And I think that's the comments tonight, and that's why I think it's come up. And with all due respect, I don't think it's about the teacher voice on that reopening task force. I think they've had that voice. It's a matter of when do we implement it. And we don't have to make that decision tonight, but I just think we've got to make that decision. A matter of fact, we have to approve a start date. If we, and if not, then the default is September 8th with the plan that we've got.
As a follow-up, I just thought I heard some very, very fundamental human concerns about the actual reopening plan and what that would look like. And what teaching in masks means was one of the things that was mentioned, but by no means not the only one. A lack of hugging being another one, not a small thing.
No, I think it's an excellent point, Sean. I think it's an absolute excellent point. And I bet if you poll the group that's here tonight of teachers, they'd prefer we only go back when we can hug. We only go back when maybe we don't have to wear masks and be in rows 6 feet apart. That's my sense. I'm not saying that's everybody on this call, because everybody comes from a different place. But I know that I've been trying for the last month and I've said this to the board on different occasions. I've been trying to picture this in my mind. It's not how we were trained. It's not how we were taught. It's not how we like to interact with kids. And I think it's going to be very uncomfortable. And I know they're talking about not going back, having an effect on a child's, mental health and emotional well-being. But I think that I also worry about the emotional health and well-being of kids who have to be in that setting, who have to be 6 feet apart, masked, facing front. Can we get them outside? Yeah, we can get them outside. Can we get them outside all the time? No, we can't get them outside all the time. I just think that's kind of what the folks who are here who have to do the implementing are saying. But I don't have the authority to change that. Only the board does, and I'm not trying to throw the board under the bus. I think we just want to get the voices to the table and then make a good decision. I think whatever we do, we'll want to start slow, even when we don't have to wear masks, and maybe we can be 3 feet apart. I don't know, but I think we want to start slowly, which is why the reopening plan was an attempt to start slowly enough. But what I'm hearing people on this call say, and I've heard it for the last 2 weeks, and the crescendo's been getting increasingly louder, that is that anxiety building to a point where we should do this at all?
Yeah, can I? So I'm curious to know, are there any teachers on? Because I've heard from some that do want to go back. Are there any on tonight that actually have voiced that opinion?
So is your question, Beth, are there any teachers on who want to go back?
Yeah, I'm curious, right? Because where are those teachers? Because I've heard directly from some of them.
Yeah. And again, they all like they said in their statement, they all want to go back. But are there any teachers that are feeling really comfortable and safe about going back on the 8th, given our current plan?
Amy, can I go?
Yeah.
Pat, is that you?
It's Patty Gray.
Okay.
So to answer, I think Sean's question, there are several of us teachers who are on that task force for reopening who are on tonight. And I think we would all agree we would all love to go back on the 8th. Do I believe in my heart of hearts that we are all ready to go back on the 8th? I do not. And I know that when I have colleagues who are fearful to send their own children back to school, that should be telling to us, because these are not people who are flighty or just, on a whim, I'm going to keep my kids home, because what that really means in reality is that they then have to juggle their work and their teaching of their own children at home. And that is some days an insurmountable task. I agree with what the teachers have said already and what a lot of you have been saying. And I want to go back to Nikki's comment about, we know the reality of this situation. This virus, they're now saying, is just going to keep spiraling around the country. We are not going to be an island in Vermont. I don't even know how much time I would give it, but I wouldn't give it a lot of time. We know it's going to come back around. So it is in our own best interest to figure out, how do we do this remote learning and do it well? Because we know we're going to be in it for, I'm not sure how long, but long enough that we owe it to our children and our students to do it well. And I'm not going to take up all your time, but I just want to bring up a comment that I have heard Dr. Fauci say at least twice, and that is that the American schools and American teachers are the great experiment. But I personally don't want to be the experiment that causes the long-term illness or death of a colleague or a student or a family member or a friend, because I don't think I could continue with that guilt. That's really hardcore. And to be honest with you, and I'm sorry, I forgot who asked the question, but I really believe that a lot of staff are feeling that way. And a lot of parents are feeling that way, because who wants to send their kid into, a COVID nightmare? We all want them to do well and we all want them to learn, but we should be smart about how we do it and how we keep them safe. So thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
I see Nikki's hand up.
Go,
Thanks.
Nikki.
Thank you, Patty. I really appreciate that. And I also wanted to say thank you to Lara and to everybody who
Amanda.
voiced their opinion. Yeah, Amanda, thank you very much. I guess I want to pose a question back to you all as the teachers. I am nervous about starting school with the students not having met their teachers. And I'm also, I guess, in the way I see this whole thing fleshing out, and this is just my vision, I'm an engineer, not a biologist, but what I see is that we have this window right now where we are an island, and being outdoors is kind of safe, and Vermont outdoors for the first 2 weeks of September is reasonable. And I guess I just wanted to throw out there, could something be created where the teachers could get to know the students in an outdoor setting, so that would teachers feel safe in a situation like that? If we did start with a remote situation, but allowed for that outdoor in-person meeting just to know who they're dealing with. So I guess I'll throw that to the teachers, and thank you guys again for being so open and honest.
Yeah. Do any of the teachers want to comment on Nikki's suggestion? Because we have talked about that especially for our little ones, but for everybody, some of us don't know the kids we're going to have next year. We don't have that in-person relationship. If we could develop a system that was totally outside, where you could get to meet the kids and get to build relationships, which we do that first week generally anyway. How do you feel about that?
So Candy has said she would be open to that.
Okay.
And so has Kirsten said they could do that very creatively in Google Meet.
Nikki, if I understood, just to clarify what you were saying, what
Yes, you can go in a minute.
what I just want to clarify, Nikki, I think what you're saying is that if we could come up with, I mean, I don't think we're saying that, okay, let's just open according to the reopening plan and everybody goes those 4 hours. What you're saying is come up with a creative way that during maybe those first couple of weeks, we could do something with staggered groups of kids to have teachers start to meet their teachers and get used to their teachers. So, maybe it's, K3 comes in one day and four through, I mean, in other words, we'd stagger it so the number, we'd have enough room outside. We wouldn't be clustered inside. Obviously we'd have to pick, the right weather days to some degree. But essentially we'd be remote, but the agreement would be to do some meeting with our kids face to face. Was that your suggestion, Nikki?
Yeah, I just, speaking from my kid, is that without that face-to-face, they're like, even if we do a Google Classroom, they're not going to be paying any attention to the screen. They have no connection with the adult, so they're just going to be off on their own. And so in order to create a connection with an adult in a safe way outdoors while we have this kind of magic weather COVID window, and maybe be able to run with that. And I don't even know if we're going to have that magic window on September 8th, but if we did have a magic window on September 8th, it just feels like it would be fantastic to take advantage of it. Because like I said, I don't think we're going to be in the building even if we do start with the plan until October. So yeah, David, that's my summary.
If you remember, we were the first district to say that we were not going to start until after Labor Day. And one of the reasons we said that was because we wanted to get a sense of how some of the other schools were doing. We thought some of them were going to start like on August 24th or 25th, and they'd have a week or two under their belt, and they would have either already shut down or something. But then the state came out with that nobody starts till September 8th. So it sort of did away with that window of time where we could both keep a continued eye on the virus and also, continue to get better at what we were doing with remote. But I think what I'm hearing some of the teachers say tonight, if not all of the teachers, if we had even a wider window, and that doesn't negate what you said, Nikki, about finding ways for teachers to meet their kids in some form or fashion that helps to build an early relationship with those kids. Maybe we could do that. The other thing about starting completely remote is it does take away the equity issue around those parents who are choosing remote, right? Because we would all start remote. It would that wouldn't help those who have registered with the AOE to do homeschooling. But if we could work on a robust remote system, and I've heard many of the teachers on this call tonight say, that is one of their number one priorities, because whether we start on the 8th or not, there's a sense we're going to be remote. So they want to get much better at that. And I think they've said that tonight several times. It's what kind of a window do we want to give for that to happen?
I'd like to speak on the outdoor education portion, but I see a lot of other people also want to jump in, so I don't know how we're going to do this. Mine's pertinent to what David just said, so if anybody else raises their hand, that's fine.
Yeah, Rachel, you're up next.
Great.
Go ahead, Rachel.
So hi, my name's Rachel Bogart. I work in special education. I'm a para-educator for kindergartners, and I work at Windsor. So my background's in outdoor education, wilderness therapy, and whatnot. And Windsor School has a ton of grounds, and I totally see it's possible to do a back-to-school event with using the track, the field, the softball field, the field by the Lois Auditorium, and then the front side like turf for the younger kids. I feel like a back to school forum and would be possible because there's still been events going on around town that are socially distanced. So I feel like logistically, in the summer I do events too. So logistically, if we had like cars come in and were given masks or hand sanitizer and then told to be going to their grade or portions area, we could make lines so that people could address their teachers at a time. So I'm totally on board for that idea. I love it. And I just wanted to address Lori Powers' couple words and concerns earlier. My parents are from New Jersey. They were both affected with COVID-19 in addition to my grandma. My grandma was hospitalized. My mother was critically hospitalized. My dad luckily wasn't. But I can tell you that even though they're all fine now, and we are very thankful for that, that my mom is having lasting effects from the hydrochloroquine, things that she's never had happen, including brain fog, motor errors, delay, losing hair, iron levels and blood levels going all off the charts. And it's something that is hard to address. And I know that with kids, although they may not die from this in a good health, there could be lasting effects. And I'm just wondering, as teachers as well, the state tells us to quarantine for 2 weeks. Are we going to be having to take our sick days, which would be all 10? Would that be covered? My parents are now and with good insurance, $17,500 of medical bills. Is there something that's going to be worked out with the state about medical coverage? Because even if we do have good insurance, it costs money to treat this. And at the time, hydrochloroquine is a life-saving medicine, but there are lasting effects. And just coming from a person who has lived this and knows that if you change the model, if we have to go back to outdoor education, you change it from a high-risk model to a low to medium-risk model. So again, I'm young. I don't have a ton of experience in everything. I can tell you my outdoor education, and I can tell you my personal life. So thank you. Thank you just for hearing me for a second. And I see, and I'm glad to hear everyone talking and voicing their concerns. So thank you, Dr. Baker, and everyone for listening.
Yeah. Thanks, Rachel, especially for the honesty around your own personal family. And to answer your simple question, there is a federal program that will protect you if it's COVID related from having to burn your sick days up. But I'm glad you asked that question. I won't get into all the details now, but I think the state is trying to protect as best they can. Any other questions, Amy? Can you see everybody? Is your mic on, Amy?
Now it is. Angie, you're next.
Hi. So I just wanted to remind you that we did have 450 parents surveyed agree to the in-person instruction.
Right.
I think if we extrapolate that data, that's 63% we have about 1,200. So I can't do that math in my head, sorry. I feel very conflicted right now because I understand navigating the uncertainty of the situation is the hardest thing that we are asking our staff to do. It's easy for me to sit in my chair and say, you will do X, Y, Z, but I really want to be sensitive to that. But we do have a plan, and we're doing our best to plan for that uncertainty. And I think we can put our heads together and come up with, make it even better than what we have. I just want to remind us that we have asked for data. And I'm looking, and I'll put it in the chat, I'm looking for the number of teachers, what their responses were to the June survey. So I'll put that in the response too. In the chat.
And we have talked about doing, another survey because, as I said, I have felt over the last couple of weeks anxieties rise. I don't know if that's happening with parents or not happening with parents. I don't know whether the undecideds will be more decided one way or the other, or whether they'll be more in that undecided column. I think those results, those parent survey results, we could do another quick dipstick around that. But I think the thing to keep in mind here, and this is why I think the voice tonight is critical, is that there are two sets of stakeholders that are very invested in when we come back, right? And that's the children, right? And there's a mixture of research about how children transmit the virus. And then there are over almost 300 adults, probably more than that when you count bus drivers and everybody else. You've got 300 adults who also have to come back and feel safe. And I think that's what you're hearing tonight. It's not so much about, the parents' survey about whether they're ready to send their children back. 60% said they were. Then there's some others. I think this is the adult voice tonight, pretty much, that is expressing some, and it's twofold. One is the virus, and the other is wanting to make sure we continue to get better at remote. Was there somebody else that wanted to speak, Amy?
I can only see 16. I see Colleen Spence has.
Colleen and Elizabeth Burrows just wanted to say something, but.
Okay.
I think I get seen because I'm a C. It's almost not fair.
I know.
I'm wondering if we need to turn back to the conversation about the not offering, but of a remote option for students that can't come to school, or for students whose parents
choose not
to.
What do you mean, Colleen? Could you ask that again?
Well, I guess that's kind of one of the reasons that we met, was to determine whether or not we were going to be able to offer some kind of remote option. And I think in this past week, we've kind of come to the place where we realize that we have to offer a remote option for people that can't come. I don't know who that is or how many people there are, but I assume there may be some. And I don't know if there's still a question on the table about whether we're, making this an option for, or making an option available to parents who choose not to send their kids to school, or if that's already decided.
No,
are we still?
No, ask that last part again, Colleen. I'm sorry. What was that last part again?
Do we still have a decision on the table about allowing students to stay home?
Yeah, I mean, I heard distinctly at the beginning of this meeting that, we didn't have necessarily
a consensus.
We may not, but there was some conversation about whether or not we've decided we're going to allow that option.
And I guess for some of the things that I've heard tonight, as we were talking, some of the stuff that Angie was talking about, I guess one of the things that I am wondering is if, I have a concern around the cost. I don't know how if it's affordable for us to say, okay, if you want to stay home, or even what that means, or how many students or parents would take advantage of that. And would we be able to afford it if we went this Calvert option? Anyway, I'll just open it up as a conversation. I don't have any answers. I just think maybe we need to bring it back around.
I think it's a good question. Elizabeth and Bill I'm just looking at the chat box.
So I see Elizabeth, Bill, Nikki, and then Bev. So go, Elizabeth.
Thank you. I want to quickly address Rachel's comment about the outdoor programming, and then I have another couple of little questions. Are we not planning outdoor programming in all of the schools? That was my understanding, was that we are.
Absolutely. We do worry a little bit when hurricanes come up the coast, but we're planning to try to get out a lot.
Like my understanding from the Albert Bridge presentation was that we were looking at, planning outdoor as a primary place, that they were looking at like keeping school supplies outdoors and you know, going to that degree. But my question for you, David, is you were going to consult with the other supervisory unions adjacent to ours to see what, because we have 3 of the 4 of our schools have students that are attending schools outside of our districts. What are the adjacent supervisory unions and districts doing? And is there any chance that you can get buy-in from them if you really want to see your supervisory union board go all distance learning? Show it by getting buy-in from your neighboring boards. That's what I think. Your neighboring supervisory unions. And also I think we were going to, you suggested at some point that we were going to hear from the NEA representatives what the NEA plan was.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you.
And actually that question is that's pretty much linked, I think, to the first part of that. What are the other superintendents? I mean, I meet with the Southeast superintendents once a week, and it's a great group. And as the anxiety level, because we announced our plan fairly early, and our start date, as I said, we were one of the first to say September 8th. And as the anxiety level has risen, we've had that conversation as a group of superintendents about how ready are we, what's our capacity to actually open in terms of the, especially in terms of the anxiety of the adults who work for us. No decision's been made. That conversation has been had, and I'm going to continue to address that with the other superintendents. Some of our surrounding districts haven't announced their plan yet, so their teachers have nothing to react to. They don't know what it's going to look like. And there are a couple of them. Westminster, I don't know where that falls. It's in the Southeast. But I don't know what that supervisory union is called.
Bellows Falls.
Bellows Falls. Yeah, they are going to start completely remote. But I have not gotten any sort of a commitment like that from Hartford or Springfield, our Woodstock, our neighboring districts. I do know that their teachers, as they announce their plans, their teachers are having the same reaction that you're seeing from our educators tonight. That there's a lot of anxiety around it. I mean, they're good sports. They're willing to be open to whatever. But I think as they get closer, they get more and more concerned. But I'll take that under advisement, Elizabeth, and I'll keep you posted on those other superintendents. What was you had one initial question though, Elizabeth? What was it? Was that the one about the regional superintendent?
No, it was about the first question was about whether all of our schools are planning some or large.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And the answer to that is yes. That if we go back on the 8th, or when we go back on the 8th, there's a lot of outdoor education being planned. Designated spaces are being given to different pods and wings and stuff so that we can do that.
The other question was whether you suggested, I think earlier in a conversation between the two of us, whether we are going to hear the Vermont NEA letter.
Yeah. Did anybody? I know that we've got a couple of union presidents with us tonight. Were any of you aware of the letter that the Vermont NEA sent to the governor's office and to Dan French, the secretary, about, and essentially that letter said something like, we should not open without 2 weeks of intensive training around both the health and safety issues, but also around the remote issues. And then it also said that no school should open unless we can guarantee everybody, and that word is a pretty powerful word, guarantee everybody's safety, adult, child, within the building.
And
does anybody want to comment on that?
It also had I think 2 weeks of training for both in-person and remote, and then a third week in which families and teachers would get together every day. in the third week, so that almost as if they make the decision then on the third week.
Amanda said she might be familiar with that statement. Amanda, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, yes, that language has been pretty consistent throughout the spring and summer with not opening schools until everybody is safe. As far as the actual letter that went to Dan French, I have not seen that yet. I'm not sure if Laura has seen that, but Bob, our NEA liaison, has been pretty consistent in his stance and his language that he's been using. So.
Okay, thank you. Bill, go for it.
Just so this affects all schools, HACTC, Hartford Career and Technology, are full-time in person. They're fairly small classes, and so they feel secure about doing full in person. And I know we have probably 12, 13 Windsor High School kids going. No, it's probably more than that.
Actually,
Yeah, it's more than that.
So yeah, it's more than that. It's a large number of seniors.
It's a large number.
Yeah, and then Hartford High School and middle school, and I haven't figured out how it's going to work yet, but no one asks me. They only have 50% of the students coming in every day. So you have an A-B schedule. So you have an A group of students and a B set group of students, so that they alternate days. And so the off day, they're at home doing work or remote. And then the next day they come in for in-school instruction. So I've manually split the classes. So most classes in the high school are about 8 students, 8 to 10 students. And so it's every other day that they come in.
Those are full days. Those are full days, right, Bill?
Full days, yeah. I'm back to the topic about the school board voting, whether or not we go offer a remote option. I'm not sure we can vote on that right now because we don't know what the remote option is going to be. Seeing this is the first time I've been part of the discussion, I take the point to heart that there are some students and families that have to be remote. And I think that the equity is a very powerful argument. Is the students with immune issues and families with immune issues at high risk. I'm still not convinced that, offering up it to anybody, because I think if the risk is there, then we probably should be just remote. If the risk can be verified, if there's cases that come up, then we need to go to remote for everybody. So I'm not sure if tonight we're going to come in with a solution because we don't know what the remote option is.
Yeah. Well, I think that we certainly presented some options, and you're right. I don't think we're going to make a decision tonight. I think the quandary that superintendents find themselves in, and I think Laura spoke to this, is the fact that we don't have good data. In other words, I hear what you're saying. What would be the reason we don't open or that we do open, right? And I think the problem we've got right now is that we don't have any data, right? Because we haven't done this. I mean, and I don't, other than some, like Major League Baseball teams trying to do this, the PGA, sports teams. I know the VPA has said no sports until school starts, whenever that is. I think that the real issue is around, and this is the part that keeps me awake at night, is just that we haven't really tried, like say at Windsor or Hartford or HACTC, we haven't tried to put that many kids in one space all day long and see what happens. I mean, I think that's part of the anxiety. Can we try it? Sure we can. I mean, but I think what you're hearing tonight is just a little bit of anxiety, or maybe a lot of bit of anxiety about that, which is apart from the remote question. But as I said earlier, if we were going to start remote, then that idea of offering remote to a group of parents goes away. And I'm not suggesting that one way or the other. I'm just saying that the two are kind of linked. And at some point, we've got to decide this. I think this board has to decide. I think this is the right board. I don't think it should be done at each individual district. I think if we're going to open a remote, if we're going to offer a remote option, we need to, we need to make that decision pretty soon. Because I certainly, after the conversation last week, I got out on a limb with our parents, and I wrote a letter saying that, we're committed to offering a remote option. I didn't say to who or what the criteria would be, but essentially, we do have a fair percentage of parents who want to stay remote.
Right, but yeah.
I'm not saying.
I mean, I have to say that the process that's been followed so far is that you had a committee of administrators and teachers, and they've come up with an option in which to start with a hybrid model to see what it's like. And I think, David, you've made a very good point right there, is that until we see what it's like, and we can say it's a complete failure or it's a success, I think we have to go with what we've planned.
Bill, use your
I
mic.
understand that there is a need for a remote because some kids can't come to school and some families can't be exposed. At the same time, I find it very difficult to think about voting on that option when we don't even know what the remote option looks like. And at what cost?
Mm-hmm. Well,
Nikki?
and go ahead.
Nikki, you're next.
So I guess I'm cognizant of trying to move the meeting forward at this hour, because I don't like to sit still for this long. So here's where I am, and I guess here's where I'm getting a sense of all 53 people that are on this call. I think we have to, and Bill might argue with me, but I do think at least the Heartland board, and when I've talked to people in Wethersfield, the Wethersfield boards feel very strongly that we have to have a remote option. And that seems like a way to move forward with this meeting is to say that we are committing to having a remote option. At the same time, it sounds like there's serious consideration as to whether or not we want to even start school in person at this point. I really think that we need to put out another survey. And I know it's hard to get responses, and I know that that's all challenging and everything. But I think we need to hit a survey with the teachers, and we need to hit a survey with the parents right now, because things have changed a lot. The national picture is substantially grimmer than it was. And I continue to say that I still don't think we're going to be in school in October anyway. And I feel like we need to, before we can make any progress, we don't know where our community is right now. We have a sense of maybe we know where our community is, but let's survey them. Let's get some hard numbers. If things have really changed, then we need to really change them. And Angie, I agree, our survey is still open, but it didn't hit the risk tolerance. And I will admit that my response has changed, and we have not hit parents and said, has your response changed? We need to hit families out there and say, how do you feel today about sending your kids? And I know that I need to know, as a board member, I need to know how many parents are out there and saying, I can't live my life if my kids don't get to go to school. And then I need to know how many parents are out there and saying, we'll figure this out. If we're remote, we'll figure this out. And then I need to know how many parents are out there saying, I really would kind of prefer to be remote right now. And I think that we may get some very different responses than we used to. And I don't feel like we can make a decision on whether or not to go remote with what came up in this meeting today until we have that information. So that's where I am. And I guess that's my proposal for how to get out of this meeting is to, one, maybe we vote today and say we will have a remote option. And then parents know that we will have a remote option, and that parents don't have to go off looking for homeschool, because that's what parents are doing right now. They're freaking out about whether or not they need to go buy a homeschool program. So we say we will have a remote option. We haven't designated it yet. And then come back in a week after we get some good survey responses and look at it and say, you know, if we do open the doors, are we only going to have 25% of our students, or are we going to get all 60 that said they were going to come initially?
Okay, Nikki, I can get behind that. I think that's a very reasonable.
Yeah.
Seeing I would never argue with you anyway. But
No.
I think for health reasons, yes, we have to have a remote. So we might as well tell parents that there's going to be a remote option. We don't have to say who it's available
Who gets
to.
it? Yeah.
And
we
then
haven't
just
said
come
that.
up with the fact that do another survey, gather more data, and go from there.
Yeah. And I think, Angie, I saw you writing while Nikki was talking. I assume you captured some of those questions because we had talked about another survey this week based on new information. I mean, it's changing. People's attitudes are changing. I also think it might not hurt to do a very quick survey with the entire staff, support staff and teachers, and get a sense. I don't know whether it's on a Likert scale or just try to figure out how our staff is feeling. I know that if I were a board member now, and I realize there are different reasons, but if I were a board member and I were contemplating keeping my child home, my children home, especially if it was around health and safety, then I would really wrestle with my conscience about why am I opening it up to everybody else? I mean, that doesn't make any sense, but I think it's going to be good to get that data, see where we are, and then come back. I just don't I think it's going to mean another meeting next week. I hate to do that, but I think I think this board is the board that has to wrestle with this. I really don't want to have this become a local Mount Escutney decision or a Heartland decision. I think this board, and we've gotten a lot of input from teachers today, needs to make that decision, both about the remote option. So were you suggesting, Nikki, that somebody make a motion tonight to solidify that we will offer a remote option?
Yeah, I think we should solidify that and say, yes, we will offer a remote option. And I am totally happy to let the administration run with picking out what it is. I frankly you guys are the experts. You pick it out.
Yeah.
And just get approval from us to say, yes, we want to have a remote option. Now, then next week we can figure out if that remote option includes the entire community or
right.
the people that just want to go remote.
No, that's a good point. So Amy, if that's the case, we should probably entertain that motion. Good.
We have two more people who wanted to speak. Actually, we have three because I saw Sean just raise his hand. So it's Beth.
Yep.
Beth Carter, then Chris Garnjos, then Sean, and then I will entertain a motion.
Yeah, so a couple comments. One, I think from everybody's data here, David, you probably have your answer to the neighboring towns. Woodstock is going back, AB. Hartford is going back, AB plus all day for the tech center. And then I think I saw Springfield. So we know what the other schools are doing. So you can go and ask, but clearly, right, this team knows who is doing what. So that's my one observation. They're all going back in some format.
That's correct.
Which I fully support. Two, I don't believe this board is the right one to make the decision for the high school. I actually think we need to have a separate conversation on the high school side, of which, right, Angie knows, I'd like to see the data broken down by the high school level, because not everybody on this board, it's not a high percentage of, folks from Heartland that send their kids to Windsor High School. It's not it's a reasonable percentage from Wethersfield. And now we know ABS, right, sends them there anyway. So I actually want to have a different conversation about the high school because I don't necessarily agree, as I've said before, with all of these sentiments. I do agree with offering a remote option, but I think we need to be careful about it because if you offer it too far, too wide, and it's too expensive, then there has to be some adjustments elsewhere in the budgets.
And Beth, I'll agree with you on the first part of that, which is I think we do, at least right now, on August 4th, or whatever that is, whatever date we're on tonight, we do know that they've got an option. I mean, and we'll see what happens, how their communities react, how their teachers react, and we'll see going forward where that is. And where I'm struggling, and because you've said this repeatedly about the high school being separated out from everybody else, and the only thing I want to warn us about is that our high school is part of a collective bargaining agreement.
I
right?
understand
We
that.
can't have I just personally feel we can't have a separate plan for the high school unless we could negotiate that, because we have a defined school day and everybody does the same thing in terms of prep time. And I just want to make that, and this is no slight on you, Beth, but I know I keep hearing that and it makes me really nervous because I just don't think that's possible. I think whatever we do within the district, it has to be reasonably the same for everybody. So if we all start remote, we all start remote. We don't start remote K-8 and then the high school goes in and teaches classes. I just don't see that. And I know you've repeated that.
I've been very right. And that's why I want to see when we do the surveys, right, to some of the comments. Yeah, you're right. We need to make sure we ask the right questions of the right audience. And therefore, right, we just need to ask the right questions and get the data so we can see it broken down that way.
I agree, Beth. I agree. And I'm certainly not trying to slight. You're incredibly thoughtful about this. I just want to be clear what we can do and can't do. So there were two more people, Amy and Lauren?
Yes, Chris, and then I thought I saw Sean put your hand up, unless what you put in the chat, Sean, was what you wanted to say.
I was just adjusting my mask.
Yeah. He doesn't have a mask. I noticed that.
Chris, go for it.
Chris.
Okay. So a couple of things. One thing that I would like to see in the survey is asking the question of how parents feel if we go back and then we go remote in a month. Is there any real value to going back? Do parents see a value in going back for a month and then having it, if the predictions, and we can argue about whether they are dire predictions or not, if those predictions are real, and there's a good chance that we're going remote and closing down again in October, how do parents feel about that versus some parents are just, looking at the logistics, and there's value certainly to getting your kids back in school, but I think that would be an interesting, I don't know how you phrase that and how you can't get specific about when it is, but I think that's a reasonable question too. And the only other thing I wanted to note was that we just heard people saying, well, the schools right around us are going back, but schools not very far away from us, Bellows Falls, is not back. They are starting remote, and so it's not 100% everybody's going back, and it's not necessarily an oddity for us to say, let's be realistic. We're not really going to get very far with this. Let's prepare to be remote in the first place.
Yeah, and by the way, when the superintendents tell me about their plans, and like I said, we meet weekly for almost 2 hours. There's a lot of trepidation out there, and they're getting a lot of pushback from some parents, from staff. So it's not different in any of those other districts. It's just, I think, as we get closer, the anxiety heightens. If you can't tell that tonight, I mean, it's kind of growing.
Okay. I had said in the chat that Christine would be next, but Katie had something specifically in response to Chris. So Christine, if you could wait for Katie to speak, and then you are right up next.
Okay. Thank you, Christine. In response to Chris, your comment about Bellows Falls going back, so with the special ed hat on here, I can tell you that the administrators down there are trying to figure out how we're going to do in-person special ed while they're starting remote, because that's part of our mandate. So one of the things we have to consider is if we do go remote, there's a population of students that we're still being held to a standard of of instructing students in person. So that which creates an equity of special education teachers, paraprofessionals, specialists, and some of those students whose families choose to have them have their in-person services, we're going to have to do. So I want to put that out there. It's not the whole population of the district, but it's a large population of the district. And it just takes what we're concerned about on a larger scale, just puts it to a smaller scale. So, and Bellows Falls, I'm actually meeting with our regional Southern special ed directors tomorrow. And we have a laundry list of questions of what to do with all of these different options. And I can come back next week and tell you what people have come up with. We're trying to network with each other because we're in uncharted territory, but it may be remote, but it's not remote for all when people are making this choice, just so you're all aware of that. And
Yeah,
Christine.
Yeah, that's a good point, Katie. Thanks for reminding us of that. There are certain federal and state regulations around FATE for special ed kids that don't exist for all the other kids. So that, and I would love to have you come back with some notes about what the other districts, especially those one or two who, because I think there's one other in our region too that is contemplating fully remote. So I'd love to know what they're thinking about for those kids.
Okay, Christine, thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, just a clarifying question. So we've spent a good amount of time looking at remote options, and as you heard Angie say tonight, there's a price tag to those options, in potentially, most likely. And Nikki, I think you said let the administration decide what that is. Is there? I mean, that's awesome, but are there some guidelines around budget constraints that we should know about? Because
he didn't really mean that.
He didn't say that, and I just want to be clear. And yeah. I will say we've been working really hard, and this is really, really complicated, and we thoroughly appreciate your support. It feels to me like that time is running out, and we have a lot to figure out. Little things like who's on the bus, can we run the buses safely? And that impacts, kids coming back, impact how many kids we can put in a class. So everything is contingent on figuring out who's coming back. So the sooner we can figure that out, the better. And I don't know if there's a way do we need to survey all parents again? Maybe we do. We talked about surveying those undecided parents. We know we need to know what they're thinking after we figure out a remote option. I guess I'm feeling the pressure of we need to figure this out sooner rather than later. Yeah. But specifically the budget question, I'm really interested in.
I think that's a good point. I do think that another week, I mean, if we meet next week, it will give us time to, like we're meeting with that other vendor tomorrow night, which is a different kind of option. We already have the Calvert numbers, which Angie shared with us. I appreciate Nikki sort of turning over the robust nature of a remote educational program to the educators, because I think that's probably not a bad idea, keeping in mind that we want it to be parent friendly too. But yeah, there will be some implications. Do we have to decide tonight? No. I think we have to decide tonight is the remote option, which I know Amy's going to look for a motion on that. And then the other thing we have to decide pretty quickly, I would say no later than next week, is what that, sort of like how that's going to work so that everybody can be comfortable with it. We have done the bus surveys. We've got a preliminary, because buses are another whole situation, right? That basically, the general rule of thumb is we're opening in a phase 2 model. The buses are opening in a phase 3 model, which is why we can put one kid in every seat. The kid has to have the student has to have a mask on, has to face front. It's going to be interesting. But right now, and I see some of our administrative assistants on the line. I think I see Linda is there. They've done a lot of work calling parents who have traditionally taken the bus. Right now, if we have that remote option, and if the undecideds tend to lean toward the remote option, we can run our buses and stay distanced and stay in compliance. But that's a big issue, is transportation around all of this. And I'd love to see how other districts are doing that too. We've been talking about that.
So can I jump in real quick, Amy? This is Jennifer.
Certainly. Thank you, Jennifer.
So I'm trying to figure out what our real goal here is, because if we're looking at a remote option for some of our families, but then we ask all of our staff to start remote, I'm not sure what that means for us planning, because next week we have our admin retreat and we're really trying to figure out what to do to help support our staff. If we do a remote option for some of our students and then tell our teachers, yeah, and you're doing a remote option too, it seems like we're not using our resources in the best way possible, right? I'm not saying that there's an answer. There's not an easy answer to this, but I feel like if we go in and we start planning to do remote option for everyone, that's going to look very, very different than remote option for 60% of our students, or excuse me, remote option for 30% of our students, and in-house option for 60%. So I guess I'd just like to encourage us to be clear on, if we offer a remote option, it shouldn't be a remote option and a remote option, right? We shouldn't have two remote options going. That's entirely way too expensive and ineffective use.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's proposing two remote options. Although I think at some point we are going to have two remote options. If some parents choose remote initially, we go to school for a month and then come back out and go remote. We're kind of stuck with that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think for the parents that are, considering keeping their kids home for the whole year, that's a homeschooling option. It's a commitment that they have to make, from the very beginning to the school, and they're committing to being a part of their kids' learning process too. I'm not sure it's something that we're going to see a ton of people opting for. I mean, it's probably going to be limited to parents that feel like they can give the support to the kids that they can. For kids that parents feel like their kids have to stay home, I don't think we'll be at 30%. I think we'll be more at that 11 or 15% that we were seeing.
Yeah, and Jen, to Colleen's point, right, and to your point, right, there will be two remote options, unfortunately, if that's what happens. Because quite honestly, I don't think, right, I mean, if there's the 11% or whatever that is of that,
right,
what I would call outsourced remote option, that is prohibitively expensive. So I can't imagine we're all saying go down that route, because if we all say going down that route, then there's a significant impact on the budget and what we have to spend in the district. From my perspective,
we can't do that.
We can't do that. So it's the remote option outsourced for a very small percentage of those students who the parents make that decision that it's a long-term part of what they do. And then if we go in and then have to come back out and do remote, that's different. And to your point, that's the level of effort, right, that we need to invest.
That's virtual learning that our
It's a
teachers
virtual
are going to
learning.
be
Exactly, Colleen.
participating in. Two different things.
Two different things. Good point.
So, given the time, it's almost 9 o'clock. And we know that there are some families that are asking to have an idea of remote learning from the get-go. I will entertain a motion that our administrative staff continue to look at the remote options for those families who would either be homeschooling or not sending their children back. Does that cover it, David?
Yeah. I think the motion could easily be to, to authorize the administration to continue to look at options that will provide a home-based program for those parents who choose that. I think it's, that's essentially, I think that's essentially it. That we're endorsing. We're not endorsing, but we're authorizing that option. That will be an option for some to start remotely.
Yeah, Amy, I guess my concern is if we authorize that option, we need to prepare that there is going to be a very heavy cost associated with that if a lot of people choose that option. So is that what we're really saying to do here? Because that could be a pretty chunky cost of money, right? I don't know how you pick. I don't know how you would pick and choose, right? I don't know how you would say if you fall into this category and you want to do this, because otherwise it's opening the Pandora's box for that very expensive option for people to choose from. Now, hopefully Colleen's right and a small percentage will choose it, but we just need to be prepared because that will have an impact on our budgets and then what we have left to spend in the school.
Beth, I think the answer to that is that if we have a very large portion of parents that pull out of school, then maybe we need to reconsider our opening.
The option, right? The option.
Yeah. Well, no, not the option.
The remote.
If parents say they don't want to go to school, then we need to.
Yeah.
We need a different thing.
Okay, so a motion has not been made. We have asked that another survey be sent out to see how parents and teachers, staff, etc., are feeling about returning to the classroom September 8th. And we will absolutely need to meet probably next Monday. And we will absolutely have to but have a decision made because there are families and all of our administrators, teachers, staff, etc., who are waiting for us to make a decision. People are trying to plan their lives, and part of that planning depends on when, if, how school is going to be opening. So, Angie, are you prepared to send out that new survey?
I can't remote. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, the chat is going crazy. And so I was trying to read it. Anyway, sorry. I have to write it. So I don't know if I heard, I think I got Chris's sends, but I'd want to get more information from Nikki and Beth. So maybe we could email back and forth tomorrow, but yeah.
Okay, and there's also been questions on whether or not the survey link can be put on town websites and or listservs, front porch forum, etc.
I'm sure it can be.
Wonderful, thank you. So in the meantime, I recommend that everyone keep their calendar open for early next week for another meeting.
Yeah, I'm thinking it won't be Monday and it won't be Tuesday because Monday is Mount Escutney and Tuesday is Wethersfield, and we'll need time for that survey to drift back in and for us to sort of aggregate that data. So I'd be inclined to go Wednesday or Thursday. And I know Wednesday there's the writing team for Portrait of a Graduate, but we could start at 7. On Thursday, we could start at 6:30.
David, Wednesday strategic plan design team. The 12th is our next.
That's the writing team, right?
No, it's the design.
Oh, that's the whole. Okay, good.
Yeah, I noticed on your calendar today when I was talking to Mike. So yeah.
I got it. Yeah. So if we should, it looks like it's the 13th, which would be next Thursday.
Next Thursday. Okay. So 6:30 next Thursday. It's a party.
It's a party. And so what are we going to do about a motion tonight? Do we need a motion tonight or not?
I do not. It doesn't feel like people are ready for a motion because they do not
make
have
that
all
motion.
of the information.
I would make the motion that we would at least be, that we would definitely be making a remote option for people. We don't have to say exactly what it is, but I will make the motion that we will be developing a remote option.
Second.
Okay.
I would second.
So there has been a motion made and it has been seconded. We have had, let's see, our meeting started at 6:30 and that's about all we've been talking about is remote options.
And it's important. I mean, I think it's good we
Oh,
spent.
it's very important. Exactly. So given that we have had significant conversation on this, would everyone be ready to vote or do you want to continue discussing?
I would be interested to hear from Beth if you have any last thoughts about the implications of offering a remote option, because you've been strong on that.
Yeah, Beth, please.
Yeah, I'm assuming you mean Beth Carter. I am fine with offering a remote option. I would just cautious us about what that option is, right? Because of the cost associated with it and how many people would decide to take a part of it. And I think to the point of, right, I don't know who it was that put something in the chat. If it's a certain percentage and above, I think we need a different remote option than something that we pay a lot of money for. But, right, I think that's one thing. So, and I would assume the other part of it is if there's a large percentage, right, from one school versus another that participate, that the cost is covered by that actual school district.
Beth, how about we have this be a kind of an open that they're looking at it?
Yes,
we don't have to make a decision. I mean, what we're voting on now is an option for them to, our administrators, teachers, et cetera, to work together to present remote options to us that we can then say, oh, I'm sorry, that one costs too much, or this one sounds just right. And we go from there. But tonight we're just asking that we look at them.
Yep, and I'm perfectly fine with that, Sean, if that was your question.
So I will, let me see.
Hey,
I cannot see everyone.
Amy.
Yes, Scott.
Yeah, Beth Carter just made the assertion that perhaps a district would be responsible for these kind of costs depending on student numbers. And we already have a plan in our supervisory union that just for distributing the costs of this running the supervisory union. And it's not anything like counting students that take part in the program. And so I don't think we can, I wouldn't want to vote on a motion right now unless it was clarified right now that we were going to be sticking to an equalized pupil cost distribution.
And Scott, I would go one step further. I think the motion is to support a remote option for those parents who, choose that option. I'm not sure I would right now tie a funding mechanism to that.
Right.
You're going to have an opportunity, to certainly decide, and we brought some numbers to you tonight, but those are very preliminary. I think we can look at that. I think it can just be a motion to support the offering of a remote option to those parents in our supervisory union who choose that.
Okay.
Right, and that was the motion. No qualifiers to it at this point. We're just asking that they continue to look for remote options for those families who would be choosing that anyway, and that they will get back to us with those options next week at our Thursday meeting, and that is when we will start getting into nitty-gritty qualifiers.
Gotcha.
Thank you, though. That's because you're right. It starts getting really nitty gritty. So,
To clarify, I thought the motion was, I hope you'll read it again, but I thought it was to direct the administrative team to offer a remote option.
yes, that we are going to offer, but they are going to be looking at what we will have to offer. And they will be presenting us with that information next week.
Yeah. I mean, I think what the administrative team needs tonight is a decision by this board, right? Because that's part of why we got a little tangled at the beginning of this meeting, because it was the first time last week that some board members had heard about offering a remote option. So now we've had 2 thorough nights of discussing it. That's what, because I don't want to put a lot of time and effort into continuing to investigate these options if the board does not want to offer a remote option to, and I'm hearing some pretty strong assent to offering that. So I think Sean's right. It could be as simple as to authorize, the administration to develop a proposal for a remote option, understanding that the board is committed to offering a remote option to those parents who so choose. I mean, I think I know we've changed the wording in that motion a couple of times, but essentially we just need the authority of this board to offer that option. So does anybody have the motion that's on the floor? Sean's asking that it be read back.
Nikki,
Yes.
as far as the motion that you said, what I had said, I did not write it down because I'm looking all over the place at stuff.
And made the motion.
That we are.
Well, I think Diane's on the call. Is Diane on the call? She sometimes doesn't have very good internet though, but she could read the motion back. Diane, are you still there?
I think she left.
David, I made the motion, and what you just said is fine. I didn't say it exactly the same way you said it, but what you just said would be fine with me from the motion.
Okay. So the motion would be to authorize the administration to develop a remote option for those parents who choose that option for their children.
Correct. And that we will definitely be offering a remote option.
Yeah.
And then I believe Nikki seconded that.
No, Colleen did.
Colleen, see, thank you, Colleen.
Second. Do we want to say parents choose option? Or are we just offering an option? Never mind.
At this point, we are saying that there will be that option. Next week, we will get down to the nitty gritty specifics
of that option.
Those options, the different plans are going to be, and then we will make that determination as a board.
Okay. Second.
Okay, so I am going to do a roll call. And I start with Beth Carter.
Yes, I am fine with offering an option. I can't wait to hear what it is.
Hang on tight.
Bill Yates.
Aye.
Is someone writing this down? Keeping track of this?
I'm keeping track of the no votes, so.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Remember, it's being recorded.
Yeah, I just sent the recording to Diane.
Anne Marie.
She just turned her volume off. She's going to turn her volume off.
Sorry, I hit it twice. Aye.
Okay, thank you. Colleen?
Aye.
Ben? Elizabeth?
Aye.
Chris?
Yes.
Okay. Mark?
Aye.
Nancy?
Yes, I just want parents to be certain that if they choose that, there's no in-person and it's for the full semester.
We'll get into that when we get into the nitty-gritties.
Yeah.
Silly, yes.
No, but that's an important point, Nancy, because there are districts that put a time limit on it.
Nikki?
That'll be in our proposal.
Aye. Scott?
Yeah, and I'm going to take the chance to comment too. And my vote is aye, but what I don't like is the wording about for those parents who choose it. It's got to be an option for everyone, and then you can choose it if you want to.
Right.
Exactly.
I think we're saying the same thing, Scott, but yeah. Well, I know what you mean.
Sean?
Aye.
Okay. Our motion passes. Yay, thank you, everyone. And given the fact that we've been here for a really long time, although I know we all love each other, I am going to take a motion to adjourn, and we will reconvene next week. Okay, so Sean made that motion, and Nancy, did you second?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm going to guess we're all in favor. Yay.
Yay.
And I sent out the invitation for next Thursday night. You'll find it in your inbox, and I really appreciate the fact that 50 some people showed up tonight. This is an incredibly important decision. I just appreciate the time that's going into this, and there's a lot of passion and emotion about it. So we'll just keep respectfully, working it out.
Right, and I have one more little thing to say. This is probably some of the most challenging work that any of us have ever done. It makes me kind of long for Act 46 meetings. Oh my gosh.
I agree.
Also, what we are learning as everyone in the United States of America and the world, what we are learning is that there is significant dysfunction in all of our social services. And all we can do is work together and do the best we can. We're not going to solve all of our country's problems or the world's problems or even our state's problems, but we can work together to do as well as we can to serve the kids and the families in our supervisory union. So I thank you, everyone, for all of the sleepless nights and the gray hair, and I will see you next week.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Amy.
I'll see the administrative team at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, right?
Thank you.
No rest.
Thank you, everybody.
No rest.
Thanks, Amy.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Angie, do you want to hang on for a minute? Hey, Scott. Angie, is your mic on?
You're recording it.
Okay, good. So I'm going to stop recording. How about that? Thank you.